My name is Bill Snow. Welcome to the second in our Environmental Conversations and Candidates series presented by the Sierra Club of Northeast Florida. Tonight, we'll be presenting a film about the issue of sea level rise in St. Augustine, the nation's oldest city. We'll then hear from our special guest, the Sierra Club endorsed candidate for the St. Augustine City Commission. So before we start the program, I want to tell you about our remaining upcoming programs. Next Monday, September 28th at 7, we will be talking about a vision for balanced development and land use developed in St. Johns County in the early 2000s. And then it sort of languished on the shelf. And Sierra Club and many other local citizen groups in the county would like to see this plan revived and implemented. So this presentation will tell you about that plan. It's a document on file at St. Johns County. Quite comprehensive, quite inspiring, a great vision. And this presentation will be followed by the Sierra Club endorsed candidate for St. Johns County Commissioner, Joe McInerney. The following Monday, October 5th, we will host the candidate for Florida State Representative for District 11, which is in Duval County, and he will present on sea level rise in Duval. So we welcome you to attend these informative programs, and I assure you, no matter which county you live in, you'll receive a lot of information that you'll find relevant and interesting. So now to tonight's program. I have muted you all in the video conference, but I encourage you to leave your comments and questions in the chat window. And before we show our feature presentation, we'll show a short video on an interesting topic often overlooked that has a lot of relevance to the issues of climate and sea level. So let's watch that right now.
So urban heat island, what is it? This different kind of almost weather, okay? Except that it's weather that's always different in cities that are paved, that have all these hard surfaces. And what that does in places like Florida especially, and any place warm, is it's going to increase the temperature of the entire area because we have so much of it that is paved, that's a solid surface. We know that when we get into on a piece of sidewalk or something, okay, if it's lighter colored in the heat of the day, it's going to be cooler because it's actually not absorbing all of that UV radiation. We know that if we get underneath the shade of a tree, then it's cooler. So if you multiply 1 tree times 2 trees times 50 trees, the more plants, the cooler the temperature. Why should we care? That's why we should care. Number one, I know that my power bill matters to me every month. And so if I have what's called a hot roof, that's a roof that's a dark color. And that dark color actually absorbs heat. And it makes the building hotter that's inside. So it takes more electricity to cool that building with an air conditioner. A cool roof is a light colored roof, and it actually doesn't absorb all that heat. So we can take these little measures like that. When we re-roofed our house, we went from the roof covering that was shingles and dark to a roof covering that's light colored. Our power bill went down. Now think about doing that for every single house in the community. And then you get lower temperature. Everybody gets to lower their bill. And on top of that, people in the city, if we all do this, stay cooler when we're outside. We don't have as much heat exhaustion happening, for example. And those are real impacts. In real urban centers, not so much like St. Augustine, but real urban centers, this is an environmental justice issue. These folks can't get into air conditioning sometimes. And so the hotter it is, the longer it stays warm in these cities, the harder it is for these people to keep healthy. So there's lots and lots of reasons to care about urban heat islands. One of the other things we can do is we can use native vegetation. We can use, when we plant our yards, we can use native vegetation instead of these kinds of rocks and pavement and everything else that we often use, and even grass. that takes a lot of water and doesn't absorb as much of that heat as does a bush, for example. Okay? So the main thing I want to get across to everybody is that these urban heat islands really matter. There are cities throughout the world who are taking this on. It's a very, very important issue. It reduces greenhouse gas emissions because we use less electricity, less fossil fuels to cool our homes. It makes us more sustainable. It makes us healthier. And if we do a lot of it, we can really build much more livable communities, starting with what choices we individually make. So, if you want more information about this, the United States Environmental Protection Agency actually has a wonderful website addressing the causes of urban heat island effect and the solutions that each and every one of us can take as a choice in order to be able to address this. So we can start small and we can make a real impact, person by person, family by family, collectively together.
So that was our short film. Now for tonight's feature film. The title is The Oldest City Underwater. This film was created and produced by Mallory Hopkins while she was a student at Flagler College in St. Augustine, and it was selected for recognition at the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival. I think you'll find it really interesting and important. So let's watch.
St. Augustine, often called the oldest city, is located in Northeast Florida. As a historic coastal town, there are a lot of things that make it a unique place to live. With a rich and dynamic past and so many irreplaceable historic buildings, there's a lot to save and a lot to lose in the oldest city.
St. Augustine is the Spanish colonial city in the United States. It predates Jamestown and Plymouth. So it was founded in 1565. We have archaeological evidence dating back 14,000 years, which makes it some of the earliest habitation anywhere on the planet. I came to St. Augustine the first time a very long time ago. As a kid in 1981, and I saw the Spanish colonial buildings downtown and the Hotel Ponce de Leon, and I was just very struck by this amazing chapter in the United States history that I had never heard anything about, and I was a history major in college.
I grew up here. I've lived here all my life, and it's a really interesting place because it's like this really cool coastal area that's got a lot of European influence. I'd say it's like the closest thing you can get to like going to Europe while staying in the States.
I think anytime you can take a physical resource, whether it's an archaeological site or it's an above ground resource, and you can demonstrate history to people by being able to provide something they can look at, sometimes touch, experience, it makes it personal. It comes off a page of paper or away from a speech, and it becomes something very real.
I think what has our major draw for tourism is just the amount of history that's here and the fact that it's such an awesome place to experience it.
Flagler College is one of the most beautiful campuses in the world and one of the city's most desirable to live in.
I always ask students what drew you here, and invariably the conversation always revolves around just having the opportunity to live in and dine in what is really a living museum. And you don't have that opportunity anywhere in the world.
I've kind of watched the city deal with a lot of different things, a lot of like big population change, obviously very awful weather.
North Florida have never been hit by a hurricane this strong.
St. Augustine was put in an unfortunate spotlight in 2017 after it was affected by a hurricane for the second time in a year. Local businesses had just gotten back on their feet after Hurricane Matthew when Irma reared her ugly head and reversed their progress. Locals were forced out of their homes in low-lying areas. Jack Cheney and his family experienced this firsthand.
I have probably the lowest lying room in our house. I had about 19 inches up the wall of water. And it was a really similar story for all of my neighbors. My parents are still paying off our house. So we had flood insurance, covered all the structural elements of the house. And we were out for about 9 months.
It's hard to tease out what part of a flood event was due to sort of wind and tide versus how much of it was due to sea level rise. The sort of really severe inundation we got with those two storms, it's more sort of storm surge driven, which is related to the hurricanes and not necessarily sea level rise. But we know for a fact, you look at tide gauges all around the country, you look at tide gauges all around the world, the ocean's going up. We know that for sure. Sea level rise is sort of inherent in the name. It's the gradual rise in sea surface height. It's due to a number of things. Thermal expansion is part of it, and then the contributions from land-based glaciers melting and ice loss.
I've spoken to the mayor. She's taking this issue very seriously. It takes time, unfortunately, to put into place a lot of mechanisms for adaptation and mitigation to sea level rise.
I don't think there's anything more important for our city to approach and manage than sea level rise. There's just not. If you don't have the wonderful buildings and the wonderful experiences that people come here for, you have no business. You have no town left.
I also have been working to save buildings essentially my entire adult life, and to think that I have worked in communities to try to help them conserve their resources, save them, preserve them, educate with them, understand, use them to appreciate for tourists, for residents, and then to think that sea level rise would turn around and take them is personally painful.
What we have to do is understand that the insurance companies have known this for years. They're looking at the same sea level rise data we are. And so we need to make sure we as a city are doing the right things to make sure we don't increase that vulnerability for the people who live here and have invested in their homes and their lives and their businesses here.
I think St. Augustine needs to think about sea level rise as the precursor to our infrastructure. The city could stand to lose a lot of revenue if those landmarks are really heavily affected. If they're inaccessible, that's going to be a really hard sell.
I just received maps that show what our neighborhoods will look like with 1.5 feet of sea level rise, which is probably a conservative number by 2030. The moat will fill in by 2030 around the Castillo. You can go to the NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer and you pick 1.5 feet, which is about what we'll see, 1.5 to 2 by 2030, and the moat fills in.
You're not talking about feet of sea level rise a year. You're talking about something that's like, it's hard to observe with the naked eye, along the southeast U.S. coast, I think over the last 10 years, like 8 or 10 years, the rates of sea level increase were 6 times that, which is significant.
If we start dealing with sea level rise, you got a lot of people that are going to be displaced. They have to have somewhere to go, and they have to have a city that can still work for them.
What we're going to start to see more of, I think, is, you know, these days where we have like 3 days of a northeast wind, or we have some like, you know, 5-day nor'easter in the winter. The coastal flooding, where it might have been bad, it's just going to start to get a lot worse.
Dr. Keyes and I have had several long conversations about how does the college plan for the future. And we've even talked to the president of the college about that and looking at what we do to protect the resources that are so singular at the college in the face of rainy day, sunny day flooding and hurricanes, just as we see planning for the city to protect their amazing historical and archaeological resources.
There would be some question as to whether or not Flagler College would in fact exist if it were not for these buildings that we have and the care that we have. But it would certainly be a very different place.
Particularly along the U.S. southeast coastline, of which obviously like St. Augustine and Northeast Florida is a part of, the sea level rise has been much higher than it has globally. So there's sort of a global average how much sea level is going up. In the southeast United States coastline, they call it a sea level rise hotspot, and we have significantly sort of increased rates of sea level rise over the last like 10 years, 15 years compared to a lot of other places.
So those are the decisions that we're going to be making as a community. How do we best manage around this? What are the things that we save and what are the things that we are not able to save?
The next step for St. Augustine is to start a city-wide conversation about how we can best prepare for sea level rise and save the history that makes it the oldest city. Keeping History Above Water is a conference intended to create a dialogue about how to preserve historic coastal cities in the face of rising seas.
It's an international conference that was started in Newport, Rhode Island, so way up in New England on the coast a couple of years ago. The first one was hosted in 2016, and there were 300 people from all over the world that came to that conference. It was truly amazing. They asked us to compete to host that conference here, and we competed against a couple of other cities. And St. Augustine absolutely stepped up very quickly. We have been selected, so we're getting ready to make the formal public announcement and move forward with that. So we will host that in the spring of 2019. So I see this as sort of my last challenge in my career, is to give it, that last hurrah and see what else we can do to try to make sure that those resources are here for the next generation. And I have kids and grandkids now, so I want them to be able to appreciate them too.
It has to be in the back of our minds and probably should be in the front of our minds, because these are really special places.
St. Augustine is more than a vacation destination. It's more than the oldest city in the U.S. It's more than the college campus that occupies the center of downtown. It's all of that. And it's a home. It's the farmers markets. It's the musicians off of St. George Street. It's all the restaurants. It's a distillery. It's the horse carriages. It's the bayfront. It's the beaches. It's some of the best places and people that I've ever met. There are enough of us that care about this city to save it.
Wow, that's powerful every time I watch it. Okay, so it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Barbara Blonder, who is a candidate for the St. Augustine City Commission, Seat 2. Barbara is a native Floridian, a scientist with a BA in zoology, a master's in marine biology, who has spent the first part of her career as a field biologist with organizations such as Nature Conservancy and the National Estuarine Research Reserve. 17 years ago, she was offered a position as a professor at Flagler College here in St. Augustine. After accepting the position, she established the environmental science minor and the coastal environmental science major, and through her teaching and advocacy, has educated and inspired a generation of future citizens and leaders to understand and protect the environment. So without further ado, I now present to you Barbara Blonder, and we encourage you to submit your questions and comments for Barbara in the chat window. And now, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Bill, for the invitation, for the endorsement, which means so very much to me. The members of the Sierra Club are, you know, my lifeblood. So I think we have a lot that we have in common in terms of what we treasure and what we care about. So I thank all of you as well for being here. I see a lot of familiar faces and names. I am much more of a interactive, in other words, you know, feel free to ask questions. So Bill is going to help me with that. I think I'd like to start. Bill gave me a great introduction and I really appreciate it. I do want to correct the record. I am not a Florida native. My mother and father are on this Zoom call, so they would be the first to remind me that that's not the case. I was born in Massachusetts, but grew up in the state of Florida from the age of 2. So I've seen Florida repeat its mistakes all across the state, and I hope that we will learn from those mistakes and correct them, and that we will start voting in people like Joe McInerney, who will help us do that. I'd like to do my part in that as well. I am a scientist, as Bill detailed. My current research, which is in review for publication in a scientific journal, is it's actually in revision. It's going back in just a few weeks, I hope, is on the impacts of climate change and sea level rise on one of our most iconic species, the gopher tortoise, which is a keystone species in coastal populations. And so I have some very close familiarity with how this series of events impacts our ecosystems. Also, I have a little bit of PTSD here, I have to admit. With the nor'easter that we've got and seeing Mallory's filming again of Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma, our house flooded twice. It was not nearly as bad the second time, but it was, we actually spent the Hurricane Matthew with Jack Cheney's family. And we're both comparing notes afterwards. They were out of their house 9 months. We were out of our house for 4 months. I hope that people aren't as heavily impacted with this nor'easter, but I frankly haven't been out too much to take a look around. We have been lucky on this one. I will say that at our house. But when Dr. Brown was talking in that video about, he's one of my colleagues, he teaches global climate change as a course, an upper level course in our department. And when he was talking about the impacts of climate change on sea level rise and how the nor'easters get worse, and I kind of had to turn off the video for a minute because it's true. We see it every year. I've got pictures of me kayaking in my street the year before Hurricane Matthew after a rain event. We've been in this house for 19 years. It was kind of humorous before it got serious, and it's not at all funny anymore. So I know you all share that with me. I'm a scientist. I'm running as a politician because the attack on science is very real, yet science offers us the roadmap to the solutions. We've let the genie out of the bottle with regard to climate change, and we've not only let that genie out of the bottle, we've actually assisted that genie in accelerating its potential for harm. I don't think it's too late to put that genie back in the bottle, but it's not going to be easy. And that's why I'm in the race. I feel like I have to do everything. I have a moral and ethical responsibility to do everything that I possibly can to try to make it right. Our son is 20. My students, you know, like Bill said, I've got a generation now of students. They really care. Just before this meeting, I was meeting with 44 of Flagler College's honors students about sustainability and what we can do in another Zoom meeting. And I hope to be part of the inspiration to them to get on board and get the work done to do this. So how do we protect St. Augustine? That's a great question. We have to make St. Augustine into a sustainable city. We have to change the timetable on how we are addressing our flooding impacts, our climate change and sea level rise impacts. In my opinion, we are reacting instead of being proactive. The science would back me up on that. We are looking at this as a ticking clock where when the film was made, it was 12 years until 2030. So that would have been 2018, obviously, that we have to make some big changes. It's not a ticking clock. The clock is racing. And every minute that goes by that we don't take significant, courageous, and deliberate action to do what we know we need to do is a minute that we've lost. We can't afford to do that anymore. So what do we specifically do? We become more sustainable. We have got to reduce or eliminate our car dependency. We do that and we reduce traffic congestion. What I like to look at are solutions that actually enhance our quality of life, that save us money, that are investments in the short term that have bigger payouts in the long term. Orlando, absolutely. We have examples all across the world with communities that have similar challenges, similar resources that are way out ahead of us. What we need to do is pull from those examples in a much more deliberate way, plug them in and tailor them to what we can do here. Green infrastructure reduces the urban heat island effect that I was talking about in my video. What that means, we plant more plants. We're the tree city. Why do all our roads have grass as the median and as the landscaping? And with some stray crepe myrtles, which are hardly effective at helping absorb excess rainfall, filter the storm water. We should have native vegetation. We've got beautiful examples of it. Southern horticulture can dial you in with that. We should be using native plantings to absorb more of that storm water, absorb more of the heat. These are really low-hanging fruit kind of things that each and every one of us can do, but as a city, we should have it in practically in our constitution, but certainly in our comprehensive plan. Roof gardens, 3 new hotels are going up. Not a one of them has a green roof. Every one of them is going to generate a tremendous amount of stormwater into a system that is not equipped to deal with the stormwater that we already have. So we have to change our rubber stamping of every new, every time that a developer or a property owner wants to rezone to a higher density, we need to stop that. Higher density is not going to help us address these challenges. We need to build better and build smarter. We need to build with green infrastructure. We need to have rain gardens in front of these buildings that help catch the excess storm water that they are generating and help filter that storm water. So these are some of the ideas I have. San Marco, I'm a bicycle and pedestrian commuter to the college, and San Marco was redesigned, rebuilt, the peanut or whatever you want to call it too, coming off of the Volano Causeway. We had an opportunity to make San Marco one of the major arteries coming into town, bike friendly and pedestrian friendly, and we didn't do it. We won't get another opportunity for, I believe, another 8 or 10 years to re-engineer that. If we wait, we can decide that's something that's really important to us, to have bike lanes on US 1. And so I just think that there's a lot of opportunities here that we're missing. We do need to address our storm water problems in a much more accelerated and deliberate way. Our storm drains function on gravity. And the reality is the drop between, or the difference in elevation between where our storm waters drain out to into the estuaries is being reduced all the time because of sea level rise. So if there isn't enough gravity fall to get rid of that water, it ponds back up into our streets and into our homes. We have got to address that. There is a project that is in the, not design phase, but it's in the funding phase. There's funding, federal funding available at Lake Maria Sanchez to address the flooding downtown with a pump station. We're going to be looking at a lot more engineering solutions that are going to be temporary. They are not going to be permanent. We've got to get to the point where we can to implement, plan for, and implement using the shorter term but much more aggressive solutions to addressing our flooding and other sustainability issues. In terms of sustainability overall, we each have personal choices to make. My students are calculating their environmental footprints and completing those assignments, and they're recognizing that their choice of diet makes a difference in terms of their personal contributions and collective and national contributions to climate change. So my students in another class are actually, they have an extra credit assignment to find seaweed, find a recipe, try making some seaweed and eating lower down on the food chain to reduce their climate impacts. So I encourage everybody to look at our lifestyle choices. I'm not perfect. Goodness knows my son is far from perfect, and that's what most of our arguments are about, actually. Water use and how we use our air conditioning. One of the things I forgot to mention in the urban heat island point, and I'll stop talking and start taking questions, is that the rate, the temperature increases that we are experiencing as a result of climate change during daytime temperatures are 3 times less than nighttime temperatures rate of change. I didn't know that until a careful reading of an article that I was using for my own research. And so that means that our nighttime air conditioning bills are increasing at a rate 3 times higher than our daytime air conditioning bills. And they're doing it longer into each year. So our cool season is shorter, but especially shorter at night. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking because I see there's a lot of questions in the chat. I think there are. Did I get that, Bill? Bill, you're muted.
Yeah, I think we have the one on significant sea rise is inevitable. How do you protect St. Augustine? I think you addressed that. And also the Patty Scott asked about the city of Orlando and all the steps that they're taking. I think you addressed that. Do we have any other questions for Barbara?
I actually would, oh, go ahead.
Here we go. Diane Battles. You can read it.
I can't read the whole thing. Let's see.
St. Augustine has a particularly complex issue when implementing green solutions. Stormwater runoff is fresh, more or less. Storm surge is mostly saltwater. A different mix of plants will be needed to address these issues. Renewable energy, question mark.
So, yeah, renewable energy, 1,000%. We have a solar farm out on 207 that's going to power increased development rather than powering what we have now. We need to get a handle on the development. In terms of the plants, you're right, but we have plants that are tolerant of brackish conditions. I think of the Kuntis in my front yard. They came out of both hurricanes with not a lick of damage. They're very attractive. They're native, they're tolerant. So there are plantings that we can do that can stand up to the wide range of different salinities that we have, that they would be faced with. And so in terms of renewable energy, absolutely, we have got to do something about the net metering in this state, where there has been such a concerted effort by FPL and other electric producers to prevent net metering. One of my colleagues was in the previous meeting was talking about having put solar on her roof, and FPL gets all the excess she generates without paying her for it. That doesn't happen in other states, but it happens in the Sunshine State.
Another one from Bill Armstrong. Will you need to relocate homes where flooding occurs often?
I think that we have a number of different options in front of us. One is elevating. One is engineering solutions. I've talked to, I don't know how many of you know Irene Areola, but we've talked about different homeowners. Literally, I asked her for my house if she knew of examples where you could put sort of like a bathtub coating on everything and let the water flow through and muck it out when you're done. We did actually have our house up for sale and changed our minds, probably a stupid idea, but realistically, we are going to have to adapt to climate change and sea level rise if we don't put immediate measures in place to slow this down significantly. We are going to have to do some retreat. That's the most difficult pill to swallow. What that means is that some homes will need to be either completely rebuilt to be tolerant to these rising seas, which is almost impossible in a community where homes such as ours are over 100 years old. Or those properties are going to have to be abandoned, and people are going to have to migrate out of harm's way. That's already happening in Miami and other places. We are seeing it in the West Coast, California as well. So this is the pickle we've gotten ourselves into. And we want this to be a choice that people can make rather than something that's imposed on them, I think.
Thank you. We have another question here from Nancy Stills. What is St. Augustine doing about disaster preparedness and recovery planning as destruction in all forms becomes bigger and badder? My prior life was with FEMA, including National Flood Program, and prior to that, International Red Cross, who anticipated massive response to climate change effects almost 12 years ago.
That's an example, I think, of being reactive rather than proactive. The city has some proactive measures, but if you look at the cities, they have an adaptation plan, and it is really got some gold in there. We aren't doing enough of it, is what it comes down to, and we're not implementing it quickly enough. The ideas are there. The city's new comprehensive plan, which should be coming back from the state, I'm told, by the end of this month, accepted by the state, will include a lot of these measures to reduce the urban heat island effect and make us more sustainable. But in terms of disaster preparedness, especially during the pandemic, I'm not seeing a whole lot of information getting out there, public education getting out there in a way that I would do differently.
Nancy, I've asked you to unmute if you want to just have a conversation quickly. Or
Are you still?
no, you remuted. Go ahead, unmute again.
Oh no.
It keeps muting you. Oh well.
Try again.
Ask the unmute.
All right, I'm unmuted.
There you go.
I think what you're saying is absolutely true, but I think we have to get past seeing it as a reactionary. It's a fact. The storms and situations are coming bigger and badder faster than we're doing any planning to prevent the repercussions from these storms and other issues that you discussed. So that has to be a bigger part of what cities are doing, because obviously in what my background in the International Red Cross was with the Climate Center at The Hague, they foresaw that the eventuality was not short coming fast, was we were not going to be able to respond. They were not going to, the government's not going to be able to. Local people need to be able to have plans in motion that they can put into action quickly. And I think you're seeing this in St. Augustine. I live in the Hilton Head area right now, but I'm coming down to St. Augustine next month. It's something that's not reactionary anymore. It's something that we need to have a stronger behavior to implement.
Yeah, Nancy, I think you're absolutely right. You raised an excellent point, especially from your perspective. FEMA was of very little use to us after Hurricane Matthew. It was impossible to get somebody on the phone and answer a question. It's one of the most frustrating parts of that whole experience. We're overwhelmed because they already had all the wildfires out west that they were dealing with. This sounds like deja vu, only all over again on steroids this year. And I think you're right. We are going to, one of the things that occurred to me and I put on my campaign webpage is that we're going to have to be a lot more localized in our preparedness. And I was thinking about food insecurity in particular during the pandemic, and we have so many people who are hungry and going homeless now. We have this big breadbasket of food production 20 miles to the, not even 20 miles, to the west of us that Henry Flagler helped implement, or they responded to the needs of the hotel and the development he was building here. Their food that they produce, all of those cabbages and everything, other than County Lines Produce, which a lot of us go to local produce during the wintertime, all of that goes elsewhere. We don't have supply chains that keep what we produce here local, and that is increasingly becoming a bigger issue. So when you talk about the local response and preparedness, I think on every level, not just food, but on every level, you're absolutely right on target. That's a great point.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Alan and Peggy Tilley are saying Nancy Shaver said that she expected a third of her streets to be underwater 90 days a year by 2030. It's possible that better drainage won't be able to cope. Is it too early to be looking at new sustainable communities inland to relocate people? Wow, that's
a tough question. There's a lot of elements to that. Nancy Shaver was taking those projections and directly from the city's strategic adaptation plan. So again, and that's on the city's website. That's what the consultants and the scientists, the projections, the models, based on different projections for low, medium, and high. And we are trending toward not low anymore in terms of what we're seeing in reality. So one of the things I would urge caution about, I am just as guilty of this when we put our house up for sale, is the gentrification of areas that have been lower socioeconomic, communities of color, by people who are fleeing coastal flooding. We're seeing that in South Florida. It's an environmental justice issue. It does displace communities. It displaces cultures. And so I don't know that, I don't honestly have the answer to that question, because it's a cost benefit analysis that has to include a wider range of just the costs and benefits that are borne by the people who have the resources. We have to include the costs and benefits to the people who aren't resourced similarly. I don't think we can address climate change without doing those types of things. We're all in this together. And so I think that the solutions come from all of us being part of this together as well. We sink or swim together. So there are communities that could certainly probably benefit from an infusion of people moving in. I think of Putnam County for example, is one of our most impoverished counties in the state. And there are certainly redevelopment efforts going on there, although I won't pretend that I have a lot of detail on that. So I hope that kind of gets at the question.
Next question is from someone I think you know, Marge and Fred Blunder. How important will science be in this election? I don't know if they're asking you or all of us, but I'll let you take it.
I mean, that's the greater election or the, I mean, globally, the national election, science is key to solving our, addressing these problems. To the local election, all the way down to the local elections. I mean, I tell you, the Soil and Water Conservation District, the mosquito control, they look at drainage and flooding. Those mosquito ditches were dug in part to drain large areas so that they could be developed on back in the day. And so I think it goes all the way up and down the ballot. Science should be one of the most important elements of it. Put it this way, scientists don't make the decisions for us. If I'm elected, I'll be part of a decision-making process. But science, as you all know, helps us make those decisions, gives us the information we need. The attacks on science are of great concern to me, and I'm sure you share those concerns, all of you.
Thanks. Besides improving our personal environmental footprints and voting for candidates who believe in climate change and protecting the environment, what else can we be doing?
I think as much as we can get involved, what was my student, I won't accuse anybody of doing this, don't misinterpret me now, okay? But the students in the meeting I had before this were talking about this free rider thing. And one of the other students in the chat box was saying, what's a free rider? And the free rider is, they put it is, if you have a group project and the person who never does anything to contribute to that assignment, but is along for the ride, right? So I think everything we can do to raise awareness, I think that's the biggest thing, is raising awareness, communicating, writing letters to the editor, volunteering, getting involved in groups like the Sierra Club, helping. And I also really have to say that you can, I'm proud to be endorsed by the Democratic Women's Club and the Florida Democratic Environmental Caucus. I don't think there's any secret as to what I'm registered at and with as a political party. But I know that the issues that I have front and center as priorities in my campaign are shared issues regardless of your political persuasion. As a result of running this campaign, I'm getting contacted by people who do not share my overall political sentiments. And we've been able to have some really good conversations though. And it's because flooding doesn't care what political party you're registered with. And so we can agree to disagree on any number of issues, but when we talk to each other, I'm finding that there's traction that can be made, that we can really, I'm trying not to be overly naive here, I really am, but I feel like there's still an opportunity, even in this divided country, to be able to talk about issues that we share and that we probably share more values than we recognize. And those, Teddy Roosevelt started the environmental movement with a lot of help. And he was a Republican. So Nixon was responsible for helping push through those key policy acts at the national level. These are not, I think those are some of the things we can do, is cross those boundaries and talk to each other and try not to be so divided. So all of those things, if that helps answer that question, that's how I see it.
Armando Lugo, he asks, how long before the peninsula of Florida partially goes underwater due to climate change. I saw a prediction once in the past that if the polar ice cap melts, the southern part of Florida will be underwater.
Yes. It could easily happen before then. I'm going to just put Digital Coast in the chat box. It's that's the viewer that Mallory was using in her movie, where you actually move a slider on the screen. It's produced by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is going to be run by somebody who is not supportive of their mission. On Digital Coast as quickly as you can. That resource stays with us. But the answer to your question is, it depends on which climate change model you're looking at. And you can get a sense of the sea level rise projections and what it will look like in Florida. Florida doesn't look good by 2100.
So that Digital Coast you're referring to is a website. So if they just
yeah, if you just type in type in
word, yeah, okay,
in your Google search Digital Coast, and it should pop up.
Yeah, that's a fascinating
yeah
mapping software. Okay, another comment from Diane Battle. Wild idea. Why not turning these flood-prone areas into rain gardens on a large scale? Buying the land like Florida Forever Funds bought Fish Island for conservation. If you're going to expect people to move, you need to have a plan to provide some compensation in a just sense. I guess this is another question. Let's take the first question first.
Okay, so
why not turn these into flood-prone areas into rain gardens?
Yeah, that's actually being done in Louisiana, in Alaska too. The federal government has done the math and realized that it's more economical to buy people out and give them the opportunity to move than it is to continue to bail them out and have them live there. The challenge there is to keep the structure of these communities that have in some instances, maybe it's not Alaska. I think it might be. Anyway, where they move the whole communities together. And so maybe that's what somebody was referring to in an earlier question about preparing, and it just triggered my memory on that. So yeah, it is a very realistic possibility, and it is currently being done in some places. I just want to say
okay, go ahead, Barbara.
One more thing about that. We think about community as being just the people, but if we have to abandon a place as special as St. Augustine, we are losing our nation's history too. All of the structures that go along with it. So that's a
biggie.
Yeah.
Nancy Stills says, good advice, vote. One thing people can do is to show up virtually or in person as appropriate at any all local public meetings and make their presence and opinions known. That's a good piece of advice. We can go see Barbara when she's elected.
I would echo that. I would definitely echo that and say that I saw a great campaign, voting, get out the vote campaign that said, make a voting plan, which is to contact your friends and actually write down how you will cast your vote, when you will cast your vote, go together to the drop-off mailbox or whatever, or at the same time separately in your cars, socially distanced, on Wednesday at whatever, on October 7th or whatever. Have a plan and actually execute that plan so nothing gets in the way of the plan.
That's a good point of doing it together. It's like it's been demonstrated psychologically, like if you exercise with a partner, you'll probably exercise more than if you do it alone, that sort of thing. Yeah. So we can apply that to voting. One thing about voting, just to be clear, Barbara's running for a position on the St. Augustine City Commission. And so if you do not live within the city limits of St. Augustine proper, even if you're in St. Johns County, you will not see her name on your ballot. So think about that I'm pretty sure there's probably people here who are not in the city of St. Augustine, but probably have friends in the city of St. Augustine who may not be at this meeting. Please, please, please contact those friends. And if you like what you heard tonight, remind them to go out and check the box next to Barbara Blunder's name.
In fact, I think, I'm speaking to whoever will invite me, whether they live in city limits or not, because if we can get Joe elected, then Joe and I know each other and we can talk to each other and work across those city boundaries. And if we can get Heather elected and Dave elected and Donna elected, then it goes way beyond the city of St. Augustine. If you feel compelled to try to help, if you can't vote for me, I have postcards, and now I have stamps, Elizabeth, if you'd like my stamps too. If you write to your friends who live in the city or acquaintances who live in the city and let them know that you would support me if you could, and why you would. I can get those in your hands. I'll mail them out to you with the stamps, and just let me know by emailing me. I'm going to put my email in the chat box too.
Oh, thank you. We're a little over 8 o'clock. We've got one more question. You have time still, Barbara, to stick around and take some more questions? Okay. Rhonda says, since sea level rise is a real issue now, as we saw in the last 48 hours, what real solutions are available now?
We can't do anything about what hurricanes are going to bring at us this year or what further nor'easters are going to bring at us right now. But my point is that if we don't get started much more seriously right now, we're even that much further behind. We can certainly be doing things in our own homes and gardens right now. French drains are a great way to re-divert water that would fall on the pavement and divert it into your yard where it can settle and infiltrate more slowly. Rain gardens in your own yard can help reduce the amount of stormwater that is affecting your yard. Native plantings will absorb a lot more water than grass. So those are 3 things right off the top of my head I can think of for right now. You could start the projects tomorrow. But in terms of on a large
permeable driveways,
and yeah, on a larger scale for the flooding that we could face again this year, there's not a whole lot we can do.
okay. I think that's about all the questions we have in the chat window. Going once, going twice. Ah, here we go. Diane Battle. Water knows no jurisdictional boundaries. What affects St. Augustine affects the rest of the county and the region.
And I would absolutely echo that and turn it right back. What happens in the county affects St. Augustine. So all of the development that is happening in the county is increasing impervious surfaces and decreasing the ability to absorb that additional storm water that we're generating. Every new road that's built does the same darn thing. We part and parcel on this together, and we've got to be a lot smarter about it. That's one other thing that I forgot to mention is permeable pavers. You could replace driveways, for example, with permeable pavers. Again, something we could do immediately. The city does not promote that. For the life of me, I don't understand why that has not happened, because we were doing it 22 years ago in Nags Head before we relocated back to Florida. That was an incentive for developers if they included permeable pavers in their parking lots. So I see we're losing people. So I want to be sure to thank everybody who still is here for coming. It's been a great set of questions.
Thank you all. Thank you,
it's been a nice challenge, and I can't thank you all enough for being engaged and for caring and for wanting to really make a difference every way you can. So thank you.
Well, Thank you, Barbara, and thank everybody for coming. And those are still here. I see a lot of thumbs up. That's great. It was really invigorating and inspiring to have a lot of real good facts and information and scientific perspective from a real scientist, as well as someone who is active. So as far as that last question about the effect of regional issues on St. Augustine, tune in to next Monday's event at the same time, same station, well, different station, different Zoom link, but go to Meetup and sign up for that one, because that'll be all about county planning issues and Florida Forever funding issues and conservation of land and protection of our ecosystems along the water. So tune in for that one, and we'll have another good night next week. And thank you all for coming, and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, y'all.